Emotional neglect in long-term relationships is rarely sudden. It's a quiet, gradual process that begins when everyday moments of connection are consistently missed, overlooked, or dismissed. In many marriages, especially those formed in earlier generations, emotional needs were often considered secondary to practical ones. Men focused on providing financially, assuming that fulfilling the provider role was enough. Women, meanwhile, often put their own emotional needs aside while raising children, managing households, or supporting their husbands' careers. Over time, however, this imbalance becomes a burden too heavy to carry silently. By the time couples reach their 70s, decades of emotional neglect may have created a silent canyon between them. Women start to feel not just unseen, but emotionally abandoned. Even if the marriage has been free of infidelity or major conflict, the lack of meaningful communication, intimacy, and shared emotional experience causes emotional disconnection. What seems like sudden hatred from the outside is often just the slow result of years of being emotionally acknowledged. Older women begin to reevaluate their lives with new clarity in their 70s. With fewer responsibilities, no more children to raise, no job demands, they finally have time to reflect. Many realize they've felt lonely for decades, even while sharing a home with their spouse. The quiet dinners, the lack of deep conversation, and the absence of emotional validation add up. These realizations can lead to a painful awareness. Their needs have been unmet, their efforts unappreciated, and their presence taken for granted. Men, on the other hand, often don't realize anything is wrong. They may view retirement as a time to relax and enjoy life with their spouse, assuming that everything is fine if there's no visible conflict. But this is a major blind spot. A wife's emotional withdrawal isn't always loud or dramatic, often comes in the form of emotional distance, disinterest, or quiet resentment. Men who've neglected emotional connection throughout the marriage may be shocked to find their wives emotionally checked out or even hostile. This disconnect is not necessarily about blame, it's about awareness. Most men weren't taught how to express emotional intimacy, nor were they told how deeply their silence or emotional distance could hurt their partners. However, it's never too late to change. Acknowledging the emotional neglect, showing vulnerability, and intentionally reconnecting can heal decades of distance. Ultimately, emotional neglect is one of the most common yet least discussed of relationship breakdown in later life. It is a slow erosion rather than a single event. When not addressed, it leads to bitterness, loneliness, and emotional detachment. But when recognized and acted upon, it opens the door to late life healing, reconnection, and even a new chapter of intimacy. As couples age, a common misconception persists, especially among men, that if they've provided a home, financial stability, and basic companionship, they've fulfilled their role in the marriage. While material security is important, it is not enough to sustain emotional fulfillment, particularly for women over 70. At this stage of life, many women begin craving something deeper: emotional connection, vulnerability, and true companionships that may have been missing or neglected for years. For decades, women in traditional marriages often sacrificed their own emotional needs to care for children, support their husband's career, or keep the household running. Many were raised in cultures that taught them to prioritize duty over personal fulfillment. But as they grow older and responsibilities shift, children move out, careers wind down, these women begin reflecting on their lives and relationships. This reflection often leads to a startling realization. While they may have been physically safe and financially supported, they've felt emotionally isolated for years. Emotional connection for women goes beyond casual conversations or daily routines. It's about feeling heard, understood, valued, and emotionally seen. It's about having meaningful conversations where they can share their thoughts, feelings, and fears without being dismissed or minimized. When this kind of connection is missing, women start to feel invisible even when their husbands are physically present. This invisibility breeds loneliness, resentment, and, over time, emotional withdrawal. Unfortunately, many men struggle to understand or fulfill this emotional need, not out of malice, but because they were never taught how. Generations of men were raised to suppress vulnerability, equate love with provision, and see emotional intimacy as optional. So when their wives begin expressing dissatisfaction or pulling away emotionally in later life, they often feel confused or blindsided. What more could she want? They ask. unaware that what's missing is the emotional bond that never fully formed or eroded over time. By the time a woman reaches her 70s, she often no longer has the patience to ignore her emotional needs. She may start standing up for herself, demanding more meaningful interaction, or if nothing changes emotionally, detaching from her partner. This isn't hatred, it's emotional self-preservation. After years of giving, she now wants to feel emotionally safe, respected, and cherished, not just provided for. To bridge this gap, men must learn that emotional connection is not a luxury, it's a necessity. Simple acts like listening without fixing, expressing genuine appreciation, asking meaningful questions, or holding space for their partner's emotions can make a profound difference. Emotional presence often matters far more than financial gifts or physical security in the later stages of a relationship. In the end, what women over 70 crave is not just comfort, but connection. They want to feel emotionally alive, not merely safe. And when men begin to show up emotionally, not just physically, they often find their marriages revitalized in ways they never imagined possible. As couples age into their 70s and beyond, something often bubbles quietly to the surface: long-held resentments that were never fully expressed or resolved. These aren't always about major betrayals or dramatic events. In fact, they're usually the result of years of small hurts, unmet needs, or chronic emotional neglect that have been silently endured. Many women, especially those in traditional marriages, were conditioned to keep the peace and avoid conflict. In their 30s, 40s, and even 50s, they may have chosen not to bring up things that bothered them, whether it was feeling dismissed in conversations, unsupported during childbearing, or emotionally abandoned during times of personal struggle. Instead of addressing these issues in the moment, they often internalized their hurt or convinced themselves it wasn't worth the fight. But the human heart keeps score. By the time a woman reaches her 70s, life changes dramatically. Retirement, health issues, and children becoming independent create more time for reflection. And with that reflection comes a harsh truth: many of their emotional needs were never truly prioritized. The things they once tolerated or minimized now take on deeper emotional weight. The result: resentments that have been buried for years begin to resurface with intensity. This emotional shift is frequently misunderstood by husbands. A man may feel confused or blindsided when his wife suddenly seems angry, distant, or discontent. He may think, "Why is she bringing this up now?" But the truth is, it was always there. She just didn't feel safe or empowered to say it until now. Women often reach a point where they no longer want to remain silent. They're tired of swallowing their emotions to keep the marriage peaceful. At this stage of life, they seek authenticity, clarity, and self-respect more than comfort or routine. Speaking their truths, even if it's uncomfortable, is a form of emotional liberation. However, if these long-suppressed resentments are met with defensiveness or denial, the emotional distance can deepen. The woman feels invalidated all over again, confirming that her needs will never be truly understood. Over time, this reinforces emotional withdrawal, which many men misinterpret as coldness or bitterness. In reality, it's the result of years of feeling emotionally invisible. But there is hope. If a husband truly listens without interrupting or justifying himself, healing can begin. If he validates her emotions instead of minimizing them, it shows that her feelings matter. Apologizing without excuses, asking how he can do better, and making small daily efforts to connect emotionally can go a long way. Unspoken resentments are not a death sentence for a marriage, but ignoring them is. After 70, it's not about blaming the past. It's about choosing to create a better emotional present and future, one built on empathy, openness, and the courage to face what was once left unsaid. One of the most common misunderstandings in long-term relationships, especially in later years, is the belief that silence equals satisfaction. Many men assume that if their wives aren't complaining, arguing, or visibly upset, everything must be fine. This is a dangerous misconception, particularly in marriages past the age of 70, where emotional withdrawal is often mistaken for peace. After decades of marriage, many women become experts at internalizing their emotions. They may stop voicing their dissatisfaction, not because they've forgiven or forgotten, but because they've grown tired of not being heard. Over time, when efforts to express themselves are met with indifference, defensiveness, or misunderstanding, many women retreat inward. They stop arguing, not because they're at peace, but because they've given up on being understood. To men, This silence may seem like a sign that everything is finally calm and smooth. Retirement is often seen as a long-awaited reward, a time for relaxation, travel, and togetherness. However, for many couples, especially those married for decades, retirement can unexpectedly become a stress test for the relationship. What once remained hidden under the distractions of work, parenting, and daily routines now comes into sharp focus. Retirement doesn't create problems, it reveals them. During working years, couples are often preoccupied with external responsibilities, careers, raising children, managing finances, and maintaining the household. These tasks can act as a buffer, distracting from emotional disconnection or unresolved tensions. Couples may fall into patterns of coexisting rather than deeply connecting, assuming that a stable routine equals a strong bond. But once retirement begins, those distractions vanish. Suddenly, spouses are spending far more time together, often for the first time in decades, with nothing to do but talk, reflect, and coexist in close quarters. For many older women, this transition can be eye-opening, and not always in a pleasant way. With the structure of everyday life gone, they begin to evaluate the quality of the relationship, not just its length. Questions start to surface. Do I feel emotionally supported? Do I still enjoy his company? Have my needs ever truly been prioritized? These reflections can bring clarity and sometimes disappointment. If a marriage has been emotionally imbalanced for years, retirement magnifies it. A woman who spent her life putting others first may now finally want to focus on herself, her happiness, her peace. And if her husband is emotionally unavailable, controlling, or disconnected, she may begin to feel resentful or trapped rather than grateful for the time together. Meanwhile, many men look forward to retirement as a time of relaxation with their wives. They expect appreciation for a lifetime of hard work, assuming their efforts to provide and support the family have earned them peace and companionship. But when their wives seem distant, irritable, or emotionally withdrawn, they feel blindsided. What they often don't realize is that retirement didn't change their wives, it simply gave them space to feel what they had long suppressed. Without honest communication and emotional presence, retirement can become a period of growing apart instead of growing closer. Couples who never built a strong emotional connection may find themselves awkward, bored, or even resentful in each other's constant presence. Old wounds resurface, small annoyances become major irritants. Silence becomes the norm, but it doesn't have to be this way. Retirement also offers an opportunity to rebuild, to reconnect emotionally, rediscover shared interests, and create a new kind of partnership based on mutual respect and deeper communication. Men who recognize this shift and step up emotionally by listening more, engaging in meaningful conversations, and showing appreciation can often reverse years of emotional distance. In the end, retirement exposes what was always there beneath the surface. For some, that's discomfort, but for those willing to face the truth, it can be the beginning of a more honest, fulfilling chapter, one not defined by the past, but by a renewed emotional commitment. One of the most common emotional wounds that surfaces in long-term marriages after age 70 is the feeling of being unappreciated. Many older women report that they spent decades supporting their husbands, raising children, maintaining the home, and sacrificing their own goals only to feel ignored, undervalued, or taken for granted in their later years. The problem is not always intentional neglect. Often, men assume that routine equals recognition. If the bills are paid, the house is calm, and no one is complaining, everything must be fine. But that's far from the truth. Women don't just want to be around someone, they want to be seen, heard, and valued. Appreciation is not just about saying thank you once in a while. It's about acknowledging a lifetime of emotional labor, sacrifices, and support with genuine gratitude. Over the years, the lack of appreciation can start to feel like a quiet betrayal. A woman may think, I've been here through everything: your work stress, your health problems, your low points. I've made meals, managed the kids, run the household, and now that life has slowed down, you barely notice me. This inner dialogue builds silent resentment. She doesn't necessarily want praise or applause. She wants acknowledgement that her role mattered, that her efforts were seen and remembered. The pain of feeling unappreciated becomes more intense in later life because of time perspective. In your 30s or 40s, you might think, things will get better. Maybe he'll change. There's still time. But after 70, many women realize time is limited. This urgency brings emotional clarity. They no longer want to tolerate feeling invisible in their own marriages. Men, unfortunately, often miss the signals. They may still be operating on outdated assumptions that their financial support or physical presence should be enough. They fail to see that emotional acknowledgement, expressing gratitude for the past, recognizing daily efforts, and offering kind words means everything at this stage. Appreciation is also not one size. It might be verbal for some. I couldn't have made it through those years without you. For others, it's small gestures, writing a heartfelt note, planning something thoughtful, or even asking about how she's really feeling. These seemingly simple acts carry profound emotional weight, especially when they come after years of silence or routine. Without appreciation, a woman starts to feel like she was only valued for what she did, not who she is. That leads to emotional withdrawal. She becomes quieter, colder, or more distant, not because she no longer cares, but because she's tired of giving without acknowledgement. The good news: it's never too late to start appreciating her. A sincere effort to express gratitude after decades of oversight can heal emotional wounds. Older women don't expect perfection. They seek authentic recognition of their life's work in the relationship. And for many, a heartfelt acknowledgement can be the difference between emotional detachment and renewed connection. In long-term relationships, especially those lasting into the 70s and beyond, what truly matters to women isn't flashy vacations, expensive gifts, or dramatic apologies. Instead, it's the consistent, everyday support that communicates love, respect, and partnership. As women age, they become far more attuned to whether their husbands are showing up for them emotionally, mentally, and practically, not in big, occasional ways, but in small, regular acts. Many men mistakenly believe that a grand bouquet on a birthday, a rare compliment, or a sudden show of affection can make up for years of emotional neglect or inattentiveness. But to most women, especially after 70, these gestures often feel hollow if they're not backed by consistent effort. What they truly long for is to feel supported in the daily rhythm of life. Someone who notices when they're tired, helps with chores without being asked, listens with intention, and shows up in the quiet, ordinary moments. This is because daily support equals emotional presence. When a man steps in to do the dishes, helps with healthcare appointments, or simply sits down and asks how his wife is feeling that day, he's sending a powerful message. I see you, I care about your well-being, I want to share the load. These small moments build a foundation of trust, emotional safety, and companionship that grand gestures alone can never provide. Older women often carry the mental and emotional weight of the household for decades. Even in retirement, many still find themselves doing the majority of the cooking, cleaning, organizing, and planning. When their husbands remain passive or uninvolved in these tasks, it can feel like a continuation of years of being taken for granted. It's not about expecting perfection, it's about expecting presence. When men choose to ignore daily responsibilities, it doesn't just look like laziness, feels like emotional abandonment. On the other hand, when husbands take initiative in daily life, forring to cook, tidying the house, managing their own health and appointments, or simply asking, how can I help today? It often revives emotional connection. These acts may seem small, but to their wives, they represent respect, equality, and love in action. It's important to understand that after 70, many women are no longer interested in pretending or tolerating patterns that don't serve them emotionally. They've reached a stage in life where emotional honesty is more important than social appearances. A man who continues to ignore the importance of daily support risks pushing his wife into emotional withdrawal, frustration, or even quiet resentment. At this stage, emotional connection must be nurtured daily, not just occasionally. In short, it's not what you do once in a while, it's what you do every day that defines the health of a relationship after 70. Daily support is the language of love that older women understand best. And when men speak it fluently, they often find that their marriages deepen in ways they never thought possible, even after decades together. One of the greatest myths about long-term relationships is that growing emotionally distant over time is inevitable. While emotional drift is common, especially in marriages that last 30, 40, or even 50 years, it is not a natural or unchangeable outcome, it is preventable. The truth is, most couples don't grow apart because of major betrayals or dramatic life events. They grow apart because they stop tending to the emotional bond that once held them together. In marriages past the age of 70, emotional distance can feel like a silent ache, familiar, yet deeply painful.